I can't picture anyone not looking forward with extreme excitement to the seventh book in the series of Mesorah Matrix, The Search for Meaning. Who isn't anxious, excited, on the edge of their seats, trying to know what the scholars, and I've already mentioned several times, there are about 170 of the greatest Jewish minds who have contributed to this series. Who is not looking forward to what these great thinkers have to tell us about the ultimate question of life? What's it all about? Why? Why am I here? Peggy Lee, a few years ago, I remember, had a song, and almost everyone was singing it. Is that all there is? And we wonder, is that all there is? I go to sleep, I wake up, I try to struggle, make a living, go to sleep again. Up, wake, sleep, and then death overtakes me. What is the meaning of all of that? I remember reading a powerful story about a torture that was cruel beyond words and actually drove prisoners insane. Here's what they did. They tied these prisoners to a grinding millstone. They were forced to push the millstone with great effort as it turned and supposedly ground wheat into flour. At a certain point, after either months or years, they allowed the prisoner to realize that the wheel that they were pushing was not attached to anything, and therefore whatever they were doing was pointless, useless, purposeless. And quite often, the prisoners went insane. Because insanity is the end result of a lack of feeling, any feeling of purpose in all that we aspire to. Do you know that in biblical law, although the Torah permitted slavery, but it was under certain conditions, the Torah felt the world was not yet ready for what in America could become the Emancipation Proclamation in the late 1800s. What the Torah did was to change the rules of slavery. It prevented a master from doing many things that we believe were part and parcel of owning another person, because you can't really own another person. So the Torah did forbid many aspects of slavery. The Torah did not condone slavery ever as we know it. Fascinatingly, the Torah forbade an owner of a slave to perform work that was clearly futile, useless, purposeless. Go dig a hole. Hurry up, dig the hole. And when you finish, fill it up again, only to re-dig it once more. That is beyond the capacity of human beings to absorb. It must have a purpose. Our work must have a purpose. Our lives must have a purpose. Any wonder then that there are people who find life worthless and unlivable because they see no purpose to their daily grind? They see it not attached to any wheel that fulfills a function. What's the point? They see no purpose, and therefore depression, therefore drink, drugs, all ways in which to get out of the meaninglessness of life. So how do we search for meaning? What is the purpose of our lives? That is the ultimate question. It's remarkable that in the history of ideas, there are two people in fairly modern times who approached this from two totally different perspectives and gave the two most possible answers to the meaning of life and the purpose of life. One was Sigmund Freud, the other was Viktor Frankl. Freud chose the way of pleasure. Freud, going back to Epicurus, who fascinatingly enough gave in Hebrew the name used for heresy. A heretic is an apikoros. Heresy is apikursus. They all come from a name, Epicurus, who taught, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you shall die. What was the essence of that idea? We are doomed from the start. We are mortal. We have a limited lifetime, and no matter what we do, has no lasting value or purpose, and therefore live for the moment, live in the moment, enjoy yourself. It's later than you think, as the popular song had it a number of years ago. Perhaps the greatest pleasure, sex, and therefore Freud identified that as the key to the drive of human beings. That's fascinating in that sex is the key to reproduction, and hence the drive that people are driven by is merely to reproduce another human being who would be guided by the same motivation to live so that he or she could produce yet another clone. To do what? There is no purpose in defining life as pleasure. It is merely the joy of the moment, and people who have embarked on that definition of meaning for life have almost invariably and inevitably seen their lives fall short of any significance. And what is amazing, and from my perspective, a built-in aspect of pleasure, is that it is self-limiting. Let me explain. I want to have a good meal because my body craves good taste, enjoyment, pleasure. And so I have the best steak in the world combined with the best glass of wine. And then I say, boy, that was great. Let me have another one. And I have another steak, perhaps if I can manage it, and another glass of wine. But I'm getting to a point. What if I want a third or a fourth, depending how obese I am or what kind of appetite I have? But you all understand, everyone understands, it is limited because the body at a certain point says, I will have no more. This is crazy. This is not getting me anywhere. And it will regurgitate. It will throw up because too much is too much. Because physical pleasure has its limitations. There is a self-regulating and self-limiting factor to pleasure, and the concept that Freud and all those who agree with him in different manifestations of what pleasure is to be defined by more specifically, grasp that ultimately it is hard to imagine that that is the meaning of life and the purpose of life when it by definition is purposeless and self-limiting. And so we come to another answer to the meaning of life. Now, what I'm going to share with you in the name of Viktor Frankl actually has been said in many different ways by different people and is the key to a Torah solution to the problem. I mention Frankl because he popularized this in psychological terms. It's known as logotherapy. It's famous. And as a matter of fact, his masterwork, a book that has been called by the Library of Congress one of the 10 most important books in history. His book is Man's Search for Meaning, precisely the title that we have asked our Jewish scholars and thinkers who are involved in the Mesorah Matrix project to deal with as well. I haven't yet read the essays. The book is not yet out as I am delivering this talk to you. But I imagine that from whichever aspect in particular our essayists, our scholars, our philosophers are going to tackle this fascinating question, it will all turn on, in one measure or another, the response given by Viktor Frankl, who came to his theory after enduring perhaps the worst and cruelest and most unimaginable barbarism, spending 3 years in Nazi German concentration camps, treated like a beast. No, that isn't correct. Beasts are treated better. Removed from humanity, almost losing his humanity as many those around him did. Viktor Frankl, who was trained to understand the emotions, the feelings, the moods of people, who was a psychologist, who wanted to grasp what was happening to him and to all those round about him, made a discovery. Most of the people, slowly but surely, lost their humanity, lost their will to live. They became automatons. There were only some who survived. Survivors had one blessing. They found purpose to their lives. They retained a sense of meaning. And what was that sense of meaning? That there was significance to their continued existence, that they had a reason for living, be it for another, be it for a contribution they wanted to make themselves, be it for a link with God. It was meaningful, and the way he put it, the Nazis were able to deprive us of almost everything. The one thing they could not take away from us was our attitude to suffering. Attitude is the way in which we approach what happens to us in life. And attitude allows us purpose. Purpose allows us meaning, and meaning gives us fulfillment. And fulfillment is the key to living a life which, understand the difference, gives us not happiness, because happiness is transient, it's momentary. Joy, an inner joy. I remember reading a story just recently of a doctor who worked 24 hours straight and saved the life of someone in surgery. And he said, I never worked so hard in my life. I felt I would faint. I was fatigued. I was hungry. And yet it was the most joyous moment of my life because I knew I had saved another. Joy comes from feeling that you are accomplishing something that is filled with purposefulness, and I would redefine that as divinity. Frankl put it this way: depression is the awesome gap between viewing who you are and who you might be. And again, in the language of David Birnbaum, what Frankl has said is the key to the difference between potential and actual. When we, as human beings created in the divine image, look at ourselves and see nothing other than a person who can eat 3 steaks and then vomit, who can drink I don't know how many glasses of wine and then throw up, we become not joyous, but we become depressed ultimately because we see how far we have strayed from our potential. Potential is the awareness of who we really are and the struggle to fulfill that divinity within us. Let me be more clear now. And I want to posit that the key difference between a Freudian view and a Frankl view of meaning of life is rooted in the existential question that goes back to the story of creation, and I would phrase it this way. Who are we? Because we are a duality. We are told that God took from the dust of the earth, meaning material, meaning physical, and then blew into it of his spirit. That is what we call neshama, the soul. We are physical and spiritual at the same time. Here is the question. Are we fundamentally a body which happens to have a soul? Or are we basically a soul which, in order to move around, has a body? Who are we? If I say point to yourself, you point this way. Do you mean your chest? No. You mean your inner you, your real you. When Freud says that the key to the meaning of life is pleasure, he is saying your body rules. Take care of your body, feed the body, and by feed I do not simply mean with food. I mean sensuality, excitement, pleasure. Let the body feel that it has been taken care of and you are happy beyond words. Not so, says Frankl. Strive, struggle, work to save the life of someone if you're a doctor, or whatever your profession is. Attach meaning to it, and your soul is joyous. What was the story that I just heard recently? Zuckerberg told it at the Harvard graduation. He said it's a story that moved him. When John F. Kennedy went to the NASA Space Center, he saw a janitor cleaning up. He walked over to him and he said, "What are you doing? What's your job?" He said, "My job is to help put a man on the moon." What he did was transform menial work into purposeful work of the highest order, and his task became filled with meaning and purpose and was able to give him the joy which comes from feeding the soul, not the body. It was Viktor Frankl who made this idea more vivid, more relevant, when he told us a remarkable story. He said that he was approached by someone in a severe state of depression. He was a doctor, highly intelligent, but his wife had passed away 2 years earlier, and he simply could not cope with his loss. He turned to Viktor Frankl, did not know what could possibly be said to him to ease his pain, But he felt, at least let him attempt to speak to him and see what he could offer. And Frankl said to him, let me ask you a question in turn. Suppose she had not died, but you had died instead, before her. What would that have meant to her? And he thought for a moment. And the doctor said, she would have been distraught beyond words. She would have been destroyed. It would have been horrible for her. Perhaps it would have been even more horrible for her than for me. And then Viktor Frankl said to her, then consider this. You have spared her that pain by her dying before you. You have accepted upon yourself the tragedy that would have been hers, and therefore what you are going through is meaningful, and her death is something that has an aspect to it that lends your suffering meaning. Said Frankl, in the aftermath of that meeting, as long as he was able to ascribe some meaning to his pain and suffering, he was powerfully relieved of his depression. The New York Times did an article as a follow-up to Viktor Frankl and logotherapy and said, someone did the following experiment. There were people who were afraid to fly. Every time they got on a plane, they were shaking with fear and nervousness and tension. What he did was, he asked those people, what is the purpose of your trip? And every one of them gave some reason, some goal, some end to their journey. And he said to them, think about your goal. Think about the purpose of your trip, and you will find it easing all the difficulties associated with the journey. And so it was. We are all on a journey. We're on a journey of life. What we need to do is to recognize that there is a goal for that journey, and the moment we concentrate on the goal, the end, the purpose, even the difficulties not only become manageable, but become part of that journey as well. What we cannot abide is purposelessness. I remember reading once the reason for seasickness. Seasickness is a powerful response of the body to the discrepancy between feeling motion and yet not seeing any movement. You're seeing the same water. You don't see yourself moving at all, but you feel the movement. Movement, feeling, knowing the passage of time and not seeing any progress is what causes the mind to become imbalanced and causes seasickness. And so I have seen the following magnificent idea. There is something called earth sickness because the earth also turns. We happen to call that time. And the passage of time is felt by us, whether it's acknowledged by our putting a check on a daily diary page or simply knowing that we're a day a little bit older. Time is acknowledged by us, but what we need to feel at the same time is meaning for the passage of time. That is the key to logotherapy. That is the key to our finding meaning to life. Meaning is purpose. Purpose is joy. And that is what religion does for us by telling us that every moment of our lives has meaning and purpose.